Tonight on Free Minds TV, Western states attempt to rein in federal power. A British eco-dweller is evicted from his cave dwelling. We'll tell you why. Also, Lancaster, Pennsylvania becoming a surveillance state, the Downiszer Dispatch, and a whole lot more tonight on Free Minds TV. Right here.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 116, and it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We have a lot to talk about. We are going to be getting into some local news happening here in Keene, New Hampshire, where we're broadcasting from, where there's some updates on the continued drama going on in the Keene District Court with people attempting to videotape the public proceedings there, and we've got an update on that. Someone actually is facing some jail time. But first, we're going to focus in on a story coming out of Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where once upon a time, the Founding Fathers fought for the revolution to keep America free. But, well, those days are long past, and I think the Founding Fathers would probably be a little bit upset about what's going on right now. It looks like Lancaster, Pennsylvania is going to be the most surveilled state, if that's a word, in the entire country, if not the entire world. The city of 55,000 people is going to have 165 plus closed circuit cameras watched by a variety of different people to make sure that, well, they're being good little citizens and not doing anything wrong, not drinking on the sidewalk or doing anything lewd and lascivious. And so they will be watched at all times. Every single street, every single public place, every single park will be watched by an eye in the sky by Big Brother.
And if it can happen in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, it can probably happen anywhere. I mean, I'm not sure what the crime rate is in Lancaster. Maybe it's higher than I believe. But Lancaster, Pennsylvania certainly isn't the highest crime jurisdiction in the United States by a stretch. So maybe, they have the city government doesn't like some of the behavior going on the street, but I doubt they have very many murders or rapes or robberies going on.
Right. The story did talk a little bit about how they're hoping that it's going to curtail violent crime, although studies have shown that it doesn't do anything for violent crime. People who commit violent crimes are usually doing it in the heat of the moment, so a camera watching them usually doesn't do all that much, is at least what the studies have shown. What it does do is it does curtail some of the little things, like drinking on the sidewalk and stuff like that, because there's always someone watching, so there's someone watching the cameras. You open a beer where you're not supposed to, and they call 911, and the police are there before you've even taken a sip of it. So it is doing things for the small little crimes, but I mean, is it turning America into something different than America once stood for? Is it micromanaging people's lives? The bureaucrats here, the bureaucrats in this article say, if you don't have anything to hide, well, why do you care about it? If you're just a citizen following the law, you shouldn't care about this. But there's something horribly eerie about having public officials watch your every move to make sure that you're walking the line completely straight. Because, I mean, let's face it, everybody messes up now and then. And is it really beneficial to be micromanaging people's lives this way? It's kind of disgusting to me, Nick. I know that we have like one or two of these cameras here in Keene. They just don't make me feel all that great to have Big Brother watching you all the time.
No, and you're essentially being surveilled more than prisoners in some jails are, to the same degree. At least that's going to be the case in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, from what the story is saying. So what's the difference between being on the inside and being on the outside? It used to be if you were a free person, you weren't in jail, you were somewhat, you were free to move about and not be monitored by government all the time. But that seems to be changing, and this is something that we predicted when we were talking about the stories coming out of the United Kingdom, that this would probably move to the United States, and it has. I mean, slowly but surely more and more cities are adopting this, and it's something that I wouldn't like to see expanded more around where we are, or anywhere in the United States for that matter. It'd be nice if they would get rid of a lot of these closed-circuit TV cameras in the UK, because they haven't done much for violent crime. In fact, I believe violent crime rates in the UK have gone up from where they were when cameras were first introduced. So they don't do anything to actually prevent serious crime, but they do curtail your liberties, and you then live in a surveillance society. I mean, arguably worse than the Soviet Union, but because the technology now exists where they can watch you all the time.
You know, the argument is given here that these cameras, they're curtailing small crimes and property damage and such, but these cameras are costing millions upon millions of dollars, and they're having to hire people to watch them 24 hours a day around around the clock. So what's the difference here? Does it weigh out in order to, I mean, you're arresting people for being drunk on the sidewalk, maybe doing a little bit of vandalism that they shouldn't be doing, but I mean, do the costs outweigh the benefits? I mean, you're costing millions of dollars for the setup initially, and then you're costing thousands upon thousands of dollars to keep someone watching it, and you're also giving up your basic freedoms and liberties. So I say we can do without the cameras. I mean, did it for hundreds upon hundreds of years, but now I guess we need to have every move watched. It's not America it used to be. Anyways, we do have to move on. There is some good news coming out. People fighting back against the federal government and their overreaching hand. Nick, what's the latest?
Well, Western states are sort of rebelling against the overreach of the federal government. Not that the federal government overreaching is anything new or anything unique to this administration, but certainly it's been ramped up over the last few months, especially with the bailout money and all the strings that come attached to that, and many new proposed programs. But the LA Times is reporting that states, including Montana, are frustrated by expanded power in Washington. And a growing number of state lawmakers are defying federal laws, even though these federal laws are probably unconstitutional, by passing legislation that aims at rolling back federal overreach. So for instance, Montana has passed a law that would essentially nullify federal firearms laws within the state of Montana. Now, their argument is that if firearms aren't being traded to other states, the federal government really doesn't have any jurisdiction. And they really don't. I mean, the federal government, the only place where it says anything in the Constitution about firearms laws on the federal level is that that right shall not be infringed. So it doesn't really give Congress the authority to do anything. It just tells them what they can't do. Also, one Utah lawmaker wants to limit federal law enforcement in his state by prohibiting local authorities from assisting the federal government officials in enforcing federal laws, which is, that's a pretty significant step to take. And there are some other proposals on the table. I believe it's another piece of Montana legislation that would make the sheriff the highest law enforcement officer in the land, or in that particular county, which again sort of places local law enforcement above federal law enforcement. And which makes sense, because the federal government is only authorized to handle a handful of crimes, and the two that pop to mind are piracy and counterfeiting to me. And that's really it. They're explicitly authorized what crimes they're allowed to go after. And it's not very many.
Right.
The vast majority of things, from drug policy to what penalties to impose for violent crimes like murder, were left up to the states. But now the federal government is more and more encroaching on what the states were permitted to determine.
You know, I think it's great to see that states are starting to stand up and fight back against the federal government, because the federal government is not supposed to be this big. They're supposed to have a very limited amount of powers. It's enshrined in the Constitution. That's not very long. It's a book that's about this fat. I mean, there's not a whole lot of power that's given to the federal government. Most things are supposed to be left up to the states. But over the years, ever since the founding of the United States, essentially, the federal government has been gobbling up more and more power that's supposed to be left up to the state, until it's the overall umbrella agency here that's dictating to the states what to do, when it's supposed to be a confederation of states dictating to the federal government what to do. So it is good seeing that some states are actually pushing back. It's only a couple, though, and I would like to see more. I would like to see more coming out of New Hampshire, the live free or die state. But you know what? People are just starting to roll over and say, well, the federal government says stuff's illegal, so we can't pass law X or law Z because, well, the federal government might come in and stop it. It would really be nice to see states across the nation standing up against the federal government and saying, look, enough's enough. Give us back our power. I mean, it's not yours to begin with.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's happened is, I know there was legislation that would have affirmed state sovereignty and saying that the Constitution does limit the federal government. That was on the table here in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, what's happening is that a lot of these measures are being judged on a partisan basis. So due to the fact that the Democrats are in power at the federal level currently, it's generally Republicans supporting it, and Democrats are opposed to it because their team's in power at the moment. Whereas that affirmation of state sovereignty and reaffirming the principles that the Constitution does limit federal authority, that probably would have gotten a lot of Democratic support just several months ago when it was the Bush administration on the federal level. But unfortunately, a lot of politicians, even on the local level, are driven by party affiliation and what they pragmatically think will get them elected the next time. They don't really base very much on principle.
Yeah, red team versus blue team. Anyways, speaking of the federal government, every once in a while, we can at least let those fools in Washington know what's going on, and we try to do that with the Downiszer Dispatch. What do we got on tap this week, Nick?
Well, this week's Downiszer Dispatch is dealing with the National Animal ID System, or NACE. And this is something that Downsized DC has been fighting for a very long time. And it does look like there's some cracks beginning to appear in the government's position that they want to force this through. As a recap, what the National Animal ID System would do is essentially force all small farms to tag every individual animal that they have, whether they're chickens or goats or pigs, with RFID technology, which is radio frequency ID technology. They'd also have to get a permit for their premises, being their farm, and there are costs associated with this. I think I've seen $20 or $25 an animal, and then like $50 for a premises permit, which if you have 10 chickens is $250 just for the animal, the fees for licensing the animals. So that doesn't make it very efficient for you to grow your own food anymore. And this was done supposedly to improve food safety, but what it really does is put more of a burden on small family farms. It's important to note that the big factory corporate farms, I think farms with over 100 animals, 100 pieces of livestock, are exempt from the individual tagging requirement and a lot of other portions of the legislation. So it was, in my opinion, intentionally designed to help out big corporate farms and just drive another nail in the coffin for small family farms. And there's really no evidence it's going to do much to improve food safety. So you can go to downsizedc.org and encourage your representatives to do away with the National Animal ID System. It's important to point out the House Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee did defund the National Animal ID System for 2010, so there is no budget to implement it in the next year, which is a good sign. It'd be nice to see that budget taken away permanently.
It absolutely would. So go to downsizedc.org to get involved there. All right, when we come back, we have a ton of show left, so we will be getting into Dave Ridley being arrested, then tried, and sentenced to jail for videotaping inside a public court lobby here in Keene, New Hampshire, as well as an eco man being evicted from his cave in the UK. All that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
Dave Ridley Report. Ridley here from RidleyReport.com, RidleyReport.com, at Ridleyography, I am the bomb. And I just want to tell you, you're watching FreeMindsTV.com, and they're like really cool, so you should keep watching them. FreeMindsTV.com, they are good.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. As always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, you have not only the TV archives, the radio archives, as well as blogs and news items that are posted up there. There's more than just the TV show to look at, more than just the radio show. There's a ton of content. The website is always changing, freemindstv.com. All right, I do want to move along. We've got a lot more to get to, and I wanted to talk a little bit about something coming out of the UK, where an eco-warrior who dug himself a cave some 16 years ago, well, he's being evicted. The reason why he's being evicted is because his gigantic cave doesn't have enough fire exits. He's dug this dwelling in the ground, but yes, local authorities are worried that his cave may burn down. Happens a lot with caves, you know, and he might be burnt up alive, so they're telling him he must leave his dwelling. It's not the first battle that this man has fought against officials. Previously, they tried to get him on illegally growing vegetables and then selling them. The man was selling a few sprouts to a pregnant woman. He's also been in trouble before for having bees on his premises, as well as, well, he had a few chickens running about his cave. And so they've been trying to get him quite a lot, and, well, this time I think they might actually get him. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He's trying to appeal it. But, you know, they say risk of fire danger too much for this man to take. He's got to leave his cave.
I have
he could dig another couple exits, I guess.
Yeah, I guess he could. It might be difficult. I mean, I have to say, the idea of living in a cave with chickens running around doing their business, it really doesn't appeal to me. But the fact of the matter is, this guy's lifestyle really isn't directly impacting anybody but himself. And if he's a free person, he should be able to dig a hole and live in it. And supposedly, the government in the UK tries to take this position of being very eco-friendly. They're trying to mandate through law and taxes that everybody reduce their carbon footprints and live in a more eco-friendly way. Yet it sounds like this guy was actually taking initiative and actually reducing his carbon footprint, actually living in an overly eco-friendly way, in my opinion, and they're cracking down on him.
Yeah, the poor guy, his name is Hilaire Perbrick. He's a 45-year-old, just if people were wondering. The poor guy, I mean, he's just trying to live in a cave. I mean, his entrance, he says, is 7 feet tall. And, you know, looking back on it, I can't think of a lot of cave fires that I've heard of. And then again, I haven't really known a lot of people who live in caves. But I don't know if this man's really at risk for a fire. It sounds like it would be a greater chance of his cave collapsing in on him. But, you know, the officials say that the fire dangers are just too great for him to stay there.
What if you put in a sprinkler system, I wonder, or something?
They want more exits, Nick. They want him to dig a few more exits for his cave. He dug it into the side of a mountain or a hill somewhere, and it is his plot of land. He should be able to do what he wants on it. But, you know, those officials over in the UK, they like to micromanage people's lives even though more than the United States government likes to manage ours. Anyways, we do have to move on. We wanted to bring it back here to the United States and talk a little bit about wiretapping. Nick, you have the latest.
Yeah, well, it's not surprising that Democrats, now that they're in a position of power, are sort of moderating their tone on the whole debate about warrantless wiretapping. Now, Senator Dianne Feinstein is saying that she's not going to come out and say that the National Surveillance Agency, that's the NSA, National Security Agency, excuse me, committed flagrant abuses of the law with their warrantless wiretapping program. But she also said that she wouldn't go so far as to say that they didn't overstep the bounds of the law or any ethical boundaries or legal boundaries to what that agency was supposed to do. So she's saying it might have been illegal, but I'm not going to come out and say that it's illegal. One has to wonder why. That's a very different tone than we were getting a few months ago when it was the Bush administration in power.
Usually it just seems to be how the way things go, Nick. I mean, when our team is in power, everything we do is great, but when the other team does the exact same thing, we ridicule them for it. It would be nice if we got some consistency, and then we could maybe even get some real change. But until then, we're going to be stuck with the exact same.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that Attorney General Eric Holder didn't want to come out and say that it was necessarily illegal either, which led Russ Feingold of Wisconsin to chastise him for not sticking to a consistent position. But what does that really do? I mean, the fact of the matter is, if Congress is not going to crack down, or at least say that what was done, you know, perusing the emails and phone calls of Americans was illegal, then we're not going to get very much real change, are we? And there were a lot of promises of hope and change in the presidential campaign that Barack Obama offered. We didn't really believe them at the time, and it seems like we had a good reason not to believe them, because once the Democrats are in power, they're not going to act so much differently than the Republicans, because what incentive do they have to protect your rights and your liberties? They really don't care. As politicians, they see it as their job to pass more laws and take away more of your liberties and more of your money, regardless of which party is in power.
Yeah, it doesn't really make a difference. Red team, blue team, they're all the same team. Anyways, we got to move on. I wanted to bring things back to local level and talk about something that, well, we've been following here on Free Minds TV, and it has to do with people trying to videotape the proceedings inside a public courtroom, as well as the public courtroom lobby. This happened, and I believe it was March 3rd. 2009 when Dave Ridley decided to go in and try to videotape the proceedings outside the public courtroom, Keene District Court, when Andrew Carroll, who was committing some marijuana civil disobedience and was on trial, he decided that he was going to go in and attempt to videotape things. Well, Judge Edward Burke has previously stated that people will not be bringing a camera into his courtroom and letting people film and things, and including out in the lobby. It just can't happen. You can't be videotaping the proceedings, then the public would know what was going on. Well, anyways, he decided to keep his camera rolling. He was promptly arrested. After being released, he had a trial date, which happened earlier this week. And at the trial, he was found guilty of disorderly conduct or contempt of court. One of those, anyways. Some silly laws being thrown at him for exercising his right as a reporter, a member of the press, videotaping the proceedings going on in a public trial. He was arrested. After being arrested, he had his trial. He was given a choice between going to jail for 6 days or paying a $250 fine. Well, he's opted to go to jail. So he'll be in jail for 6 days for running a video camera in a public space.
Yeah, and it's important to point out, I think Dave ran into trouble for filming in a public court lobby. So they can't even really, the judge can't make the argument that filming would interrupt court proceedings, because what court proceedings go on in the public court lobby? I mean, either Dave was filming supposedly public court proceedings, which is protected, or he was filming something that wasn't court proceedings, which is protected by the First Amendment, and the judge can't even make the argument that he was causing some kind of an interruption to the actual business of the court. And I would argue that, it's more, in my opinion, it's more like he wasn't actually filming inside the courtroom, so the judge really had no jurisdiction over the lobby. I mean, how far do they extend it? I mean, that's, so the city offices are also in that building, and in the past, I know that the court has tried to make the claim that their jurisdiction extends all the way out to the parking lot, or something ridiculous like that, to the back door.
They just want power. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, this is a case just shows what they will go through in order to get a conviction here and put someone and slap someone on the wrist, put them in jail, or give them a big old fine for simply exercising their rights. It's the government trying to hold their power together because, well, once you let a little bit slip, well, then the whole thing's opened up for attack. So they've got to really be able to stick with the power, show that they're the guys in charge. And I mean, how many thousands of dollars has it cost to not only arrest and then convict, take him through the trial, and then going to be housing him for 6 days? How much is this costing the taxpayers? And even if you don't agree with what Dave Ridley is doing, well, do you really want to be the one to pay for it? Has he really harmed anybody? Has there been a single victim from this? No, the only victim are the taxpayers and, of course, Dave Ridley, who's going to be in a jail cell.
And it's, under New Hampshire law, you are supposed to be able to film in a courtroom. There, you know, it's an example of the government using a loophole very broadly. There were, you know, it was written into law that they can make certain exceptions. That was intended to be for sensitive cases, like if there was a sexual assault or something like that. But there aren't any gory details about a sexual assault or any kind of infamous crime going on in the public court lobby, or at least if they are, they're being freely offered. So it doesn't make any sense that the judge should be prohibiting people from filming inside the courtroom. Of course, he's going to use whatever power he thinks he can wield, and he has gotten away with this so far. I mean, obviously, Dave Ridley has been convicted. He is going to serve time in jail. I think there's a serious question about whether the judge is actually complying with the law here, but, you know, he is the judge, so what's he going to do, bring himself up on charges? Clearly, he agrees with what he's doing.
Yes, King Burke. Anyways, if you guys want to watch the entire video on that, it was actually recorded since this has happened. Video cameras are now allowed back into the courtroom, so if you want to see the whole video, it is up at freekeene.com. We'll also post a link to it on the show content page at our forum at freemindstv.com. All right, moving right along, I want to take a look at something that's been happening in New York City for a number of years now. This is happening to public school teachers. You know, those ones that, well, they're accused of doing something wrong, or they just flagrantly do something wrong, but they're under tenure and they're under the protection of the teachers union, so it's not very easy to fire them. What happens to these people? Well, they're put in what they call a rubber room, where teachers, while they can't be fired, are still paid between $70,000 and $100,000 a year, to sit in a room and essentially do nothing. They read magazines, they play Scrabble, and they surf the internet, but no real work ever takes place. These teachers can stay there for months or even years collecting a paycheck for doing absolutely nothing. And it brings into question, if these teachers are so bad, why can't we fire them, Nick?
Well, the teachers' unions wield an immense amount of power. In most school districts, you have what's called tenure. So once you're in for a certain period of time, it's very difficult to fire you, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, when you have public employees, government employees, organizing, forming labor unions, essentially what a labor union is designed to do is give the employees leverage against the management. Now, the theory here, and I don't know how much I buy into it, is that if you're a government employee, you're a public servant. So it's really, I think what the unions have served to do is create an us versus them mentality, where the teachers union wants to get as much as they can out of the tax-paying public, when supposedly they're the servants of the tax-paying public. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It seems what they're doing is they're just keeping a bunch of people employed that should not be. I mean, if you have to hire a person for $70,000 to $100,000 a year plus benefits to sit in a room and do nothing all day, what are they really worth? I mean, it's time to move on and get rid of them. It's costing people in New York $65 million a year, and that's just in New York City. I mean, I don't really exactly know what goes on in other parts of the country, but it seems that if you have a bad teacher, you should be able to let them go. If you have a bad worker, no matter what the job is, this shouldn't be limited to public schools. If they're a bad worker, you should be able to fire them. In fact, if you own the business, if this is in the private sector, you own the business, you should be able to fire a worker for any reason you want. I mean, that's how it works with my job. I mean, I have a verbal contract, but my employer could always let me go because, well, they didn't like the fact that I'm doing the show or something. But luckily, I've been lucky so far, and they haven't done that. And I do a good job at work, so hopefully they'll want to keep me there. But that's how it should work. It shouldn't be the fact that, well, your employer is too scared to fire you because they might get sued, or they have a labor union that will go after them if they fire you. If you're a bad employee, well, you deserve to get fired.
I mean, I don't have a problem with workers organizing in the private market. I do have a problem with a lot of the laws that are put in place that stipulate that exactly what kind of collective bargaining rights they have. So I do have a problem with a lot of the laws on the books on that. But I'm not really so sure that public employees should be organizing at all, where they can go on strike and when they can essentially shut down what is supposedly an essential service just because they want more money. And I don't really even understand why the teachers union wants to keep these people on. I mean, it seems to me...
it makes them look really bad.
Well, and I don't think these are people that, obviously, other New York City educators didn't want to work with these people. There's a reason they're in the rubber room. The fact is they're not competent at their jobs, at least not anymore. So why would other educators who supposedly are, and I'm sure many of them are, motivated by a desire to educate young people, why would they want to keep incompetent people on the payroll sucking up the budget for education? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, it really doesn't. And if people want to get a little bit more on this, I think it was John Stossel from 2020 on the ABC program, did a program, Stupid in America, where he talked about teachers' unions and this subject in depth. I'll put a link to it up on our show notes on the forum at freemindstv.com. But we are out of time for this week. Log on to the website, freemindstv.com, for archives of the shows, the radio side, which is live on Sundays from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the blogs, the Liberty News Roundup, and a whole lot more. It's all there at freemindstv.com. Well, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.